Hi. I decided to make this video to show you guys what coding looks like for me in 2026. It looks quite different from what it was only 6 months ago. 6 months ago, I would spend most of my time coding directly in an IDE, um, doing both the planning and the programming directly myself. And nowadays, I spend most of my time coding directly in terminal using a tool called claude-code, which is it's like an AI coding tool. So I'll just show you what that looks like. So I set up a batch file. I'm running under Windows that launches kind of like Linux, WSL, Windows subsystem for Linux. And it launches claude-code inside a Docker container running inside Linux. You don't actually need to use Docker, but I'll explain why I use it this way. So I'm currently working on two different projects simultaneously. One is called Styler. That's why you see the batch file that you see there. So Styler is just like a code formatter and linter, similar to Prettier, if you're familiar with that in the TypeScript world or whatever Node world. But Styler is for Java programming language. And the second project I'm working on is, let me see if I can bring that over. So first of all, the Styler project is here. It's really at the beginning phases right now. I spent about 3 months building this in my quote unquote free time. And it has most of the Java language parsing correctly. So that's kind of where I'm starting now, and I set a goal for myself to try to commercialize some aspect of it within 18 days, kind of like 2 weeks, just because I think I'm close enough to the point where I can get something done. So that's the main project I'm working on, and the second project I'm working on is a workflow tool for claude-code. I called it CAT just because whatever, I could come up with any better name. It's based on a tool by someone else who surprisingly had no programming background at all. He used to be a musician for many years, and he decided to get into coding to build music-related tooling. So he has a kind of like a workflow called Get Shit Done, and it basically allows you to code in a much more friendlier workflow, kind of like I always compare to Choose Your Own Adventure. You sort of like, it's like coding with a coding buddy. Okay, so you sort of bounce ideas off each other. You plan features and the roadmap of the project and build it step by step. So it's kind of like a friendly it's a configuration to have claude-code behave as a friendly coding buddy, okay, or coworker. But because this person who built this had no formal education in programming, I felt that it could use some additional best practices, coding best practices that I wanted to add. For the first 6 months, I programmed in claude-code. It produced some really cool prototypes for me. It pumped out code faster than I could, like 10 times faster than I could. But it was producing like when I tried maintaining that code and digging into it and seeing what was actually going on and adding features myself, I discovered it was like a big ball of mud. It was just, it was kind of like having a junior dev, just throw stuff together without thinking about the long-term viability of maintaining the project. So a lot of code was copy pasted multiple times across multiple files, different versions of the same thing, no real reuse. It was a bit of a disaster. So what I do nowadays is I have claude-code do. So I describe to claude-code what I want built. I let it work at a little portion of it at a time. Then it commits its changes to Git, and then I review those changes. I provide feedback. It updates the commit based on the feedback, and we go back and forth until we get to a happy place. And then I accept that commit, and that is, one task complete. And we sort of do this incremental development over time, and slowly, we build a working product this way. I find that when I code with claude-code, I spend about 50% of my time just reviewing its work, correcting its mistakes, working on its on infrastructure problems, on workflow problems, on mistakes and bugs that it creates. So like there's definitely a high overhead of handholding with claude-code, but for the remaining portion where it does the programming, it's quite a bit faster than I could program myself. And I find that the net effect, even if I'm losing 50% of my time to correcting its mistakes, on the whole, I'm still moving faster than I would be without using this tool. So I always, I compare it to like an accelerator or a catalyst. It just, it's just a tool like anything else. I don't believe it'll, definitely not in its current form, replace programming anytime soon, but it's a great tool to make you faster, to make you more efficient. So I'll show you what it looks like, okay? What the flow looks like. So when I got started working with this, I did what everyone else does, which is they just have their ID, they install some sort of plugin. You click this little plugin, it pops off the side. You start chatting back and forth with the AI agent, and it helps you code here and there. But I found the workflow is just quite terrible. Hard to describe why. It just was, and I just find that nowadays I'm a lot more productive if I just don't even open the IDE at all. I code fully in the terminal with claude-code. So just to introduce you to the concept, claude-code is just a terminal program. You sort of chat with it, and it will produce code, and I'll show that to you in a second. But I basically just let it build the code. I do all the feedback back and forth in the terminal. The only time I go back to the IDE is when I'm reviewing its changes. So I'll look at what it committed, and I will see if I can find a good example. I don't really have one recently. I will sort of review, let's say, some of the tests it adds, and see if it's testing the right thing, if it's testing implementation details, which is like a junior move, or it's testing business logic, if it has good coverage, if I like the style it uses, or because very often one of the biggest problems with AI agents is they just have a pretty terrible coding style that doesn't reflect the way I would be coding. So I always have to massage the outputs a lot. So that's what I use the IDE for, basically just for diffs, just to sort of to have a better visualization of what changed. And here's what coding looks like. So without any workflow, without anything like this this cat or get things done workflow thing that I mentioned, essentially you start with a blank slate, an empty project, and you basically give Claude a bunch of tasks to code, and it's going to try to do that. I have an existing project with a workflow that tries to adhere to my policies and my style a little bit more. So there's commands that are kind of like not scripts, but kind of like workflows, like documents that explain to it what workflows I like, what kind of my coding style is like, all these things. And again, I adopted part of it from the other workflow there to get things done or get shit done. So let's just look at where we are. We can run this progress command. When I run this command, Claude reads. There's like a file that describes what the progress command should do, and it's just executing that now like a script, kind of. It's reading the state of the project, the roadmap of the project, the state, like how far we are into it, which issues are complete, which issues are pending. It's reading our coding conventions and project technology stack and that sort of thing. Because when you start working with a coding agent, it basically knows nothing specific about your project. You have to sort of, every session you start, it remembers nothing from the past. It's a blank slate. So you also have to remind it. It has to read and has to be reminded of where it should start from, where it should resume from. So I ran this command. It sort of made itself aware of the history. And so with the workflow we have set up, we have a concept of milestones, releases, and changes. Change is kind of a bad name, but that's kind of what it is, right? So like milestones are like 1.0, 2.0 release of the product. Releases are kind of more like this, 1.1, 1.2, like minor versions. And changes are just like individual tasks. They're actually they're groupings of tasks. So whenever I ask it to do a bunch of work, it'll say, okay, I'm going to work on the following 3 tasks at a time, let's say. It'll bundle them up into a change, and it'll go off and do that, and then come back to me at the end of it for me to review the work. So I ran this progress thing, and it's telling me here's kind of like the upcoming things I can work on. So getting back to it. So I'm building styler, like I said. So it's basically there to be a code formatter. So it has to parse Java code, and it still has edge cases that it doesn't know how to parse correctly. So what I did is I took a project called Spring Framework, which is a very large Java framework, very large framework in Java that has many different code styles in it and such. And I ran styler against it. It of course ran into a lot of scenarios. I guess you could say scenarios it didn't recognize, couldn't handle. And so I just made tasks out of that. Fix parsing. This scenario, fix parsing that scenario. So that's kind of like what we're going to be working on. So when I run execute change, it's going to pick the first item. I assume it's going to pick this bug to work on. Okay. Oh, it thinks it's already implemented, so it might work on the second one. We'll see what happens. So what it's doing now is it's reading the command execute release, which makes me wonder, did I run the run? Oh, so there's 2 of them actually. Interesting. Oh, sorry, there's only one. I misread. Okay, so it's reading basically a script file called execute release, which tells it how to, I need to rename it, but it's essentially execute change and execute release, kind of the same thing. It basically says I'm going to work on the next task. And then it's, let's see. So it's asking me if it should work on this task next. I think the 05 is like the change number, and 03 is like the release number or something. Sorry, no, the opposite. Release number 5, change number 3, something along those lines. That doesn't really matter. the human description for it is like fixing lambda parameter parsing. So currently, we're not parsing this correct. It creates 318 errors when we try to parse the Spring framework. I'm going to basically tell it, go ahead, take a look at this bug, figure out what's going wrong, create tests for it, ideally using TDD, test-driven development, reproduce the problem, fix the bug, run the tests again, see that they pass. Then we're going to massage the source code together, and if I'm happy, then we're going to merge it back into main. So as you can see, it's basically thinking out loud, right? This is kind of like you're working with a junior developer or junior coworker, and it's just telling you what's going through its mind, kind of. It's not really, there's no mind there. And I usually read through this as it's working, because very often it makes mistakes, logical mistakes, or it goes off on tangents, just like people do. It focuses on it prioritizes the wrong aspects of what it's working on sometimes, and just goes off on tangents. And I want to sort of keep it moving in the right direction. So I sort of keep my eye out for if I need to make corrections along the way. Okay, so it's learning about, it's doing research and finding out about like what kind of syntax, lambda parameter list, whatever it could have. It's looking at the code, which of these cases are handled correctly and which are not, and seeing what changes it needs to make to the parser to fix the broken scenario. Now, the thing that's interesting with claude-code is while it's working, you can actually you can write other stuff. So you don't actually have to stop it and then send it another prompt. You can send interrupting prompts in the middle. So, for example, did you figure out the problem, right? So if I send this over, Claude will still keep on working in the background, and when it gets a minute to see, it was in the middle of writing this file. And only now it got to see the sentence I sent it, and it responds, right? So you can use this mid-conversation style to steer it in the right direction. If it starts making changes in the direction that you don't like, you can basically say, don't abort the whole task, but actually I prefer you do it this way. You know what I mean? So what did it do so far? Let's just go up. So for example, it showed me that it made the following change in parser, and it shows me a diff. It added the following lines, right? Now I have no idea which function this is, because I don't remember what's on line 2505. So I could either open up the ID and look into it, or in my case, I don't bother. I will look at the finished product once it's done all its changes. But I just take a bit of a look for I look for basic things. So for example, when it adds a function, is it forgetting to add documentation? What kind of methods and functions is it adding? It doesn't make sense. I actually read about like, why is it adding this function? So I'm kind of like incrementally doing code review, and then I do the final code review once it claims it's done. So it made a function to detect whether there's a lambda parameter list, which is, I guess, the scenario we're not parsing correctly. And it gets quite complicated because it is a parser after all. Code style is actually pretty decent because I've worked at it before. So it currently is following my code style. In the past, when I started, it never used to add comments for private methods. And sometimes the methods were obvious, and sometimes they totally weren't. So I just decided I wanted all the methods commented. So that's worked out pretty well for me. Okay, parsing lambda parameters. Okay, right. So this is where I asked it if it knew what the problem was. It says, yeah, I already figured it out, and I'm working on a fix. So it added token type.eof into the source code, and it realized as it started compiling. So it tried using the new code it injected. It compiled it got compiler errors, and it realized, oops, like that symbol doesn't even exist. I assumed it did, but it doesn't. And this is because a couple of releases ago, I actually renamed the variable from this to that. It just discovered this now. It's noticing it now, and it's making a course correction. It's fixing that bug. It's just a minor syntax error. Now it's adding tests. And right off the bat, see, I noticed a problem. There's a workflow problem. So it's adding tests. That's fine and all. But the problem is this, and I'm going to tell it. So there's something I introduced in that cat workflow that the original workflow doesn't have, and it's called learn from mistakes. It's a script. So I'm going to make use of it now, and I'm going to explain to you what it does. So learn from mistakes. When applying TDD, you are supposed to create the tests before fixing the problem. Create the tests, check that they fail, implement the fix, check that the same tests now pass, and then test the fix against the original production code that was failing to double check that the test you created actually capture the problem that needed to be fixed. So I've hit this in the past where it creates tests. It says, aha, I finished, I fixed the problem. And it fixed a problem, but it didn't fix the correct problem. It was not, it did not correctly figure out what the problem was in the first place. So it fixed a problem, but not, it should have just kept on going and figured out that actually there was more than one problem. So that's kind of like what we're going to do is we're going to invoke this command, learn from its mistakes, and I'm explaining to it what it did wrong and how I expected it to behave instead. Okay, so look, it's not even aware of everything I typed. It's just keeping on going off how it is. But I want to change the workflow, not just for now, but for all future cases, so that in all future cases, when it's trying to fix bugs, it does it in that order. It does it correctly. It always tries to follow TDD moving forward. Now, so be sure to introduce apply preventative measures to. Okay. I wanted to fix the problem in the workflow, not just in Styler, so that anyone who uses the workflow will benefit from that going forward. So if I have another project tomorrow, I will benefit from that. Okay, so that's another thing to point out is claude-code has this wonderful flickering bug. It's had it for over a year now. They're slowly working at it. It's a lot better than what it was, but whatever. Just ignore it. It's not a big deal. So you notice it hasn't responded to me. It kind of glossed over what I said to it. And that's another bug, or I don't like the way it's behaving. I don't know if it heard or consumed what I sent it, or it just ignored it or forgot about it. So I'm going to try to tackle that problem as well. Why did you ignore? So we're going to do a bunch of things here. We're going to copy this so it doesn't get lost, and I'll explain to you why. It's doing this thing called compacting conversation. So what happens is AI agents can only, they have a memory of only a couple pages of conversation at a time. Like if you look on the right, this is the limit of its memory, not very long. So every couple of minutes, when it reaches some threshold of length of a conversation, it'll create a summary throw away 90% of the content, and then flush its history and start a new conversation. And at the top of it, it'll just kind of get like bullet points of what we talked about last. See, that's what just happened. And it's reading basically bullet points that explain to it where we left off, but it doesn't remember everything. And so now it has more space to continue the conversation. But this can cause, memory loss. Sometimes it throws away the wrong details. Things that I did care about are not captured in the bullet points, right? So I always make sure if I notice that it didn't answer me, I don't know for sure that it actually saved what I wrote, right? I don't know that it wrote it down anywhere, that it might get lost essentially after compaction. So I copied it. I'm going to paste it in a second just in case, okay? But let's see if it actually did remember. So I'm going to ask it, why did you ignore my request to learn from mistakes? And I want to see if it realizes it made that mistake or not. Okay, so it does remember. It knows that what I talked to it about was TDD, right? So that's good. In fact, you can see it here in its to-do list. This is the kind of like check boxes of things it's worked on and what it plans to work on next. So this is a good sign. The fact that it has it in its checklist means that it did remember it. See, 5 items from its to-do list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know. 2, 3, 4, 5. So it actually might have needed me to remind it in order for it to check back somehow and figure it out. I don't know that it actually remembered that it would have picked it up without me reminding it. So let me just quickly show you what Learn from Mistakes does. It has a bunch of steps. Step 1, which I don't see it doing. Yeah, okay, it does it here. Step 1, it goes through, so even though it compacts its history, its conversation history, it doesn't have the previous session in memory, but it has it written on disk. It logs everything on disk, okay? Because that it can do. So, well, that's a problem actually. This is not supposed to happen. So what's supposed to normally happen is, the first step, so this is another bug I'm going to have to fix, but the first step is that it should reread the conversation history from disk, which is the full thing verbose. And it should scan it. It shouldn't read the whole thing because it doesn't have enough space in memory to load the whole thing, but it should scan it using grep or whatever else to look for the portion that I'm referring to related to this mistake it made, right? So it looks through history, it locates around where it made a mistake, then it reads a bunch of text right before it, a bunch of text right after it, and it wants to sort of see what went on around that time, to figure out like what happened, how did it make that mistake, to try to figure out the root cause. So, it sort of tries to summarize what happened in step 2 based on the conversation research. Excuse me. In step 3, it tries to dig into like, why did this happen? Why did I make that mistake? And it goes through the 5 whys. There's many ways you could do this, but this is just one approach. And it believes that the root cause is that, the command I ran, execute change, doesn't tell to run TDD implementation, which is another procedure I documented for it. I never told it to use that one command should use the other. So this is kind of like it's saying it's a mistake on your part. You did not provide this documentation. You didn't provide this instruction for me. I just didn't realize this is what you wanted. So the next step always, once it knows why something happened, is it has to prevent it from happening in the future. It has many options of doing this. It could update the documentation. That's one way. It can, sometimes the documentation does already contain the instruction, but it's vague in some way, so you could improve the clarity of the instruction in the documentation. And the last step it can do, if everything is clear in the documentation and for whatever reason it just didn't follow the instruction, it can add these things called hook scripts, which are basically scripts that run when certain events occur. So what I could do, for example, is I can add a hook that whenever it wants to write to a file, which could be for any reason, right? But let's say it starts implementing something. Um, it starts implementing a fix. The hook script runs, and it says, "Wait a minute, you're writing a new feature or you're running a bug fix. Um, did you also run? Did you write tests for this before you started, or are you doing implementation first and test second?" Um, and basically, if it catches that the agent made a mistake, it injects a prompt on my behalf, as if as the user I caught it and I said, "Wait a minute, you're doing this wrong." So it's just, it's automating. Uh, um, what's the word for this? It's kind of like gatekeeper. It's acting as a gatekeeper. Now, so hook scripts are very effective, but they're very dumb. I mean, they don't have any AI in them. They just scan the conversation history for certain keywords, right? So when they work great, um, but it takes a lot of fine tuning to get them to catch all the cases in which they should intercept a conversation and tell the agent that it's doing something wrong and course correct. And furthermore, there's an overhead to them because every time, for example, there's many different kinds of hooks, but every time I write a file, it has to run all the hooks. So if I have 100 hooks, it means that every single time I'm writing a Java file, I have to also run 100 shells. I have to spawn 100 shell commands, wait for each one of them to return, and only then do I get to write a file to disk. So you need to, balance performance with accuracy, I guess, with the proper behavior. You want to be smart about this. Okay, so what did it end up doing? It basically, I see it's reading the wrong file. It's not the path I wanted to touch. It basically says there's a documentation problem. Okay, right. So implementation of prevention. It got to the next step. It says, okay, I decided that I want to fix it by updating the documentation. Here I go. Let's see if it edited the right file. It did not, in fact, edit the right file. It edited the workflow. Okay, so the cat workflow, it's a plugin, but there's a local copy of it installed just for Styler. It edited the local copy, which is not going to help me at all for other projects. So I need to correct it. At this point, it kept on going, so I'm a little late correcting it, but that's fine. We can still do that. So I don't want you to edit the cache files. I want you to fix the problem. Okay, so I wanted to edit the source code of the plugin of the workflow. Let's see, so it basically catches on. It says, okay, I'll also fix it there. Let's see what I missed while I was reading on what it did. Okay, so the other thing that's really cool about the learning from mistakes flow is that I introduced the concept of retrospectives. Like, it's actually the only part of Agile I like is retrospectives. I think the rest are just kind of trash. Sorry to say. So I basically log all the mistakes that occur over time. And every once in a while, I run a retrospective where I look at all the mistakes and I look for patterns. I look for repeated mistakes. If I learn from mistakes, it logged that it fixed the problem. And then the same mistake happens later on. It clearly didn't fix the problem. And so we have to derive lessons from that. And it basically indicates we need to extract action items from the retrospective and find a better way of fixing the problem and see that it really got fixed. So this is valuable. It's something I would recommend you do as well. Okay, so it thinks it finished everything. It updated the wrong file, but it made the right change in the wrong file. And then it went back to working on fixing the parser, right? It started working on the parser again. It said it finished the work. And then I had some problems with commits. Okay. Right, so it's updating the status of the current task it was working on, because the task I worked on before this one was actually in release 6. I thought I finished all the parsing problems. I discovered parsing problems. I went back to release 5. Don't worry, nothing was actually released, so I'm allowed to go back in time. I didn't actually unrelease the product. Okay, so it basically updated the state of the project. It says like I'm not working on release 6 anymore. I went back to release 5. There's more stuff to work on there. And then I reminded it that it edited the files in the wrong directory. It went and it applied the edit to the right directory. And let's look at the change it made, right? So these script files that I explained to you, they're actually in Markdown format. They're written basically kind of like in English, and that's what the agent parses and executes. This is its form of scripts, and it added a section that reminded it that it must. Oh, I don't like it to be Java specific. So I'll fix that as well. But it reminded it that when it does any sort of work, it has to follow TDD. Okay. So now it logged a second. It logged the second mistake, and that is, I guess it logged it just for a different directory. Okay, but let me just fix it. So when you updated, okay, update it shouldn't be language specific, or rather, the TDD workflow or the TDD requirements, whatever workflow shouldn't be language specific. Like this workflow, this plugin is not supposed to be specific to Java. I happen to be using it for Java, but the workflow file doesn't have to make it specific to Java. It would work anyway. So it's going to go back and fix that a third time. So it just makes the language more generic. And in fact, if you look at the changes it made, we don't really need point 1. Point 2 and 3 were enough to trigger the right behavior. So this is actually an improvement. Okay, so now it basically, so it updated the workflow, that's fine. It's going back to working on the parser. It's having compiler, it's having linter problems in the parser. So I actually am using another linter to fix my linter. To at least, while my linter is being built, I'm using another pre-existing linter to keep the quality higher than it normally would be. So it's basically trying to figure out, like, I got the code working, but it's being rejected for design purposes. The function is too big. How do I split it up into smaller chunks so it's more readable? No, it's doing the wrong thing. So that's another thing you need to see is like, AI agents will always try to move forward. They don't like getting stuck, and they'll do dumb things to work around it. Either implement the wrong thing, or I'm getting a linter error. I'm just going to suppress the linter error. No, you're not allowed to suppress linter errors. You're supposed to fix linter problems, the underlying problem. So I'm going to remind it again. Well, first of all, before I do that, let me just double check I'm understanding this correctly. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, and for mistakes, you are forbidden. Agents love caps. To suppress NCC whatever violations. You must fix the underlying problem. So it already has a rule not to do what it's doing. And I learned from mistakes before, and it put in some sort of prevention, and of course it's just not good enough. So hopefully it's going to pick up on that. We're going to see what it says. So notice this whole time I've basically been chatting with the bot, right? And in terms of the IDE, the way I configured it, let me see. Yeah, the way I configured it is it's supposed to work in its own Git work tree, which basically means it cloned the repository into a different directory. It's working in that different directory in a branch. When I'm happy with the result in that branch, I'll give it permission. It's going to merge that back into main. I'm in main. It's working in a different Git tree, so I don't see directly into its repository. So some of these commits are directly on main. So workflow problems are going directly to main, but the actual parser fixes, I believe, are unstaged changes in its own repository, which is why I don't see them yet. When it's done, I'm going to see them all. So let's see what's going on. Right. Okay. So it's creating a helper class because it's trying to decompose this very large parser method into multiple sub steps or multiple methods. Now, you see, as it's writing new files, it doesn't show me a diff. And in fact, this file has many lines in it, 251 lines. And the default behavior is Claude will only show me the first 9 lines and just tell me there's more lines. And if I want to see more, I have to jump through hoops. I have to press Control O and then Control E, and it loads this longer history from disk. And then if I scroll up, I basically see more verbose output, like all the hooks that are running, things that it hides from me from default. And here, it's showing me the full line, the full file I actually wrote. So if you want to dig into the details, again, while it's working incrementally, you can do so. It's just, by default, it's hidden from you. Other AI agents like Gemini and Codex actually show you full details. It's not clear which is better and which is worse, because in their approach, it kind of crowds out everything on your screen. And in the case of claude-code, well, you can't really see what the heck it's doing until you look at the end and the final diff. I'm fine with it. I'm just used to the workflow it has. You can adjust to it however you like. So, what do we have? It created a helper class. It's now referencing it from the main parser. And now it's gonna try to integrate. It's gonna try invoking this helper class and methods from the main parser. Because it's having to share code between the two, it has to change the visibility, I guess, of certain methods. So I'm gonna. This is perfectly fine, okay, but I don't like this design architecturally. I want to do something better. So I'm gonna find something. What's it called? Oh yeah, exactly. Share secrets, because I did this recently. Share secrets. I wanted to use this other design. So I actually wrote this post a long time ago, and I'm gonna tell it, I don't want you to make the methods package private. I want you to use this mechanism instead. So I'm telling it, use this design instead. And this is kind of like what what's kind of cool and different about programming with AI agents. Again, it's like having a junior coworker, junior developer, or buddy who's working on this code for you. And you can steer them in the right direction. It's not that what they're doing is wrong, it'll work. But for long-term maintenance, I prefer this approach. It'll result in better, easier to maintain code. So it went out, it read the Stack Overflow post I made. In fact, it didn't even have to. It already had it built into its LLM history, like knowledge, it looks like. Because if it would have gone out and read this, we would have seen an extra prompt saying that it's going out to the internet. And it didn't do that. And I did not mention this to it, at least in this session. So yeah, it's built-in knowledge for it. I guess I'm popular and part of the LLM. Okay, so there you go. It's being the refactoring I asked for, which looks hideous, but results in better APIs at the end of the day. Right, let's see. So I'm just going to wait for it to finish this one feature. And I'm going to see if I can show you guys kind of like the end result. And then I'm going to try ending the video. And if it takes too long, I might just end the video ahead of time and take my word for it, it works. It just might take a little bit longer. So you can see so far we've been working on this one task for about 32 minutes. Okay? And granted, there were a lot of workflow corrections along the way, and that also wasted a lot of its time and my time as well. So hopefully these are the kinds of corrections you only need to make once, and it will learn to not make that workflow mistake again. But I mean, there's hundreds of these workflow mistakes. Like, you rarely have to make the same correction more than twice, I would say. It tends to do it at least twice, but a third time it kind of gets it. But it just takes a while. It could take months for it to make less and less of these mistakes. Like 3 months from now, I'll never see these mistakes, and there should not be regular mistakes. The only reason I'm seeing them now is because I totally changed my workflow recently, so I threw away a lot of the corrections I had already implemented. I didn't carry them over, and that's my loss. Okay, so it had a session of action. It's going to resume. Right, so these are all the extra methods that moved into the helper class. It's just going to delete them. And you can see this file is already quite big. Right, it's already into the thousands of lines. This is one of those things that I'm pushing it more and more to get away from by adding more and more restrictions to its workflow, by forcing it to write better and better code. And this will get better over time. In past projects I worked on, I try to limit all files to like I think like 1,000, maybe 2,000 lines or less, and it's quite doable. I'm not very proactive about doing it. I wait until they get pretty big, and then I take a session away and I just focus just on that. Okay, see, so it has a single function that's 1,500 lines, 12 lines long. The limit is 1,500. It needs to remove more. I will actually reduce this limit over time. For now, I'm letting it make it big because a parser tends to have very large methods. And it actually is harder to break these down into many functions without kind of hurting readability. So it's kind of a little bit different for this particular project, but we'll see. Maybe I'll eventually circle back and improve this even further. And there's one more thing I wanted to do, which I'm forgetting. Oh yeah, exactly. Okay, so one of the things the workflow is supposed to do that's not doing correctly So according to the workflow we're following, when we run that execute command, okay, oops. Yeah, when it runs that command, it's supposed to run it in a sub-agent, which I'll explain in a second, and it didn't do that. So it's writing code, but it's just not running it in the right agent, essentially. I'll explain that to you in a second. So according to, okay. Okay, so sub-agents are just kind of like the main agents spawning off a sub-process with a brand new conversation, so it erases all its history, and it says, just do these 1 or 2 tasks, and then come back and tell me the result of that operation. And the reason you want to do that is because sub-agents, see it's moving all the code off into helper methods. Because AI agents get really dumb the longer the history gets. They start forgetting things, they follow rules not as well. There's just too much stuff on their mind. That's a non-technical explanation, but long story short, you want to sort of ideally have a new agent created, do 1 or 2 things, and shut down, and the next task will run in a separate agent. And each one of these agents will have very short histories, conversation histories, and that way they'll be more productive and more compliant with the rules you set out. Right now, the main agent is running everything. It's doing multiple tasks at once. It's making lots of changes, and it's having to do compaction, right? Conversation compaction, and that leads to worse performance. It produces worse code. It breaks rules more. All these things go wrong. It gets slower as well. So I wanted to not do this. It's not supposed to do this. The workflow tells it not to do this, but it forgot, right? So let's find out why. Okay, let's see if it does this. It is ignoring me. So we're going to add another little bit of fun. We're going to write the following. So this is the ultimate fun. Learn from mistakes for having not learned from mistakes. Also, update your workflow. No, update your configuration to always respond to the user immediately after they send you a message. If the message is related to the current task you are working on, then act on the change immediately. Otherwise, acknowledge the user's message and add the task to the end of the to-do right list. So to-do right is that checklist. This is the to-do right list. So I'm basically telling it like from now on when I write anything, I need to know if you took note of it. You have to respond right away. If it's relevant for what you're doing right now, if it changes the direction you need to go in based on like if I'm telling you to change the current task, act on it immediately. Otherwise, add it to the end of your to-do list, but don't forget about it. See, so for example, it did this update. So now it's remembering that it has to eventually do all these learnings, right? And look at this, it's acknowledging me right away. It's apologizing. Okay, so it's gonna eventually learn from all those mistakes. It's gonna make corrections to the workflow, but it's actually following what I told it. It's not doing it right away because it's not relevant. Like, it doesn't change the current task it's in. It can wait, and that's okay. So it will keep on working on what it's doing. And if I don't like it, if I wanted to act on it immediately, I'll say, no, start running what you're doing in a sub-agent right away. I probably should do that, but let's just let it do its thing since it's close to the end anyway. And then we'll get to the rest of the stuff. Right, see, it's running into compiler errors as it's refactoring. Okay, so it just finished, oops. It just finished correcting linter errors. PMD is a linter. It tried compiling, and lo and behold, that linter should not have passed. You had compiler errors. Okay, and then it's going to rerun all the tests following TDD. It's going to run all the tests to make sure it didn't introduce any regressions by moving code around. That's great. I don't like this though. No, see, that's specifically what I told you not to do. Slap on the hand, bad bot. What's it called again? Share secrets. Okay, it's doing the wrong thing, and I again need to tell it to do the right thing. This is kind of like this is what happens when you have long sessions. When it's not running in sub-agents, this is exactly what happens. It keeps on apologizing, it keeps on doing the wrong things, and it keeps on doing the wrong. Okay, here we go. Yeah, basically you had it working in the first place, and then you refactored it and broke it, and you went off in the wrong direction. Again, just like a junior programmer, that's what we're here for, to make course corrections. That's gonna introduce that very long line of code. It's fine, that's the correct approach. No, it doesn't. It doesn't add NCSS. It doesn't add non-commented something lines of code. Non-commented. Forget what the SS stands for. Nope, none of those things. PMD. Non-commented source code. Source code. Hey, dude, the acronym doesn't make sense. Non-commented SS, SC. Where's the SS coming from? Non-commented. Nah, there's no way. Okay, non-commenting source statements. Close enough. Same thing. But long story short, I introduced a new class that does not at all relate to the the other method that was too long. This is a new method. They're unrelated. They should not break. So he passes. So it made a false assumption. It thought it would break something and it doesn't. Okay. Oh boy. Now it's trying to commit its changes. And it's having to deal with, git staging and merging and all that harmful stuff. Okay, we're almost done. Now, what the workflow should be doing, but it probably will get wrong, is after it commits the changes, it should stop and ask me for permission to merge into main from its private branch into main. And if it does not do this, so it's supposed to stop and I'm supposed to go and check the diffs, and if I'm happy I go back and I go and I tell it to go ahead. But in the meantime, it doesn't like stopping, right? So it just keeps on going, and it sees it has other things on its checklist. So it's going to go through all these learning from mistakes. It's going to make all these corrections, and when it's done, everything that it knows it can work on, it'll give me a summary. Either a summary of everything it did. Actually, it will give me a summary of everything it did, that for sure. And then it's going to ask me what to do next. And if it does the right thing, the question it should ask me is, it should ask me to review its work and ask me for permission to merge it into main. Okay, here we go. It's adding a hook script to prevent it from trying to suppress this lint rule. And the reason it's doing a hook script is because it modified the documentation enough times that it didn't help. It still broke that rule. So it's now adding a hook script, which is like for sure going to work. It's a lot more draconian. It's a lot more effective. But it's the last resort, essentially. So that's what it's doing. Okay, so next thing, mistake number 2, not responding to messages right away. And the other thing I noticed is, I think you made a mistake here. In the first mistake it's covering, it didn't update the retrospectives. We'll see if it catches on to that. So mistake number 2, not responding to me immediately. Okay, so it's going to apply the change here. That's okay. It's specific to the styler project, that's okay. I don't necessarily need that in the workflow. Okay. Ah, smart. It added both changes. See? So it didn't forget. It noted in the retrospective the 2 mistakes it just covered above. And now it should work on that last 2 tasks. Okay, last task. Now it's investigating why it didn't run the work in separate sub-agents. Okay. That's the other thing that drove me crazy. I need to rename. Why does cats execute change, run, execute, release, workflow? Shouldn't the workflow be renamed? Wait, or rather, do you need to rename the workflow to execute change only? For consistency, I'm gonna let it finish its thing first. I don't want it to go bonkers. Yeah, but actually it finished. Okay, so let's tell it to do that, and let me just read what it said. Right, so the workflow has 2 modes, kind of like auto mode where it doesn't stop at all for asking for permission, and the other mode that I'm actually running in now. Oh, interesting. So it thought it was in auto mode, maybe? Yeah, okay. It shouldn't have done that, it realized. No, no. No, it's making excuses. It's not implementation, it is a violation. So I'm going to clarify to it what it's wrong. I'm just going to quote what it said. And in fact, what I could do is, can I do this? Learn from mistakes? I think I can. I apologize for trying to weasel my way out of this. Let's reconsider the evidence. Made multiple mistakes that resulted from context degradation, right? Because it stuffed everything into a single agent. Yeah, that's absolutely exactly the reason why I'm doing this. So, okay, so now it's trying to scale learn from mistakes, because I pointed out that this really was a bad mistake. It's gonna read the history. See, it's doing grep. This is the conversation history file. Okay, it's just counting, I guess, how long the conversation was. 718 lines, way too long. And look at all the bad things that happened because of it. You didn't pay attention, you didn't follow TDD, all these things because you didn't use sub-agents, okay? Root cause, the project lacked explicit, no. This has to be corrected in the workflow, right? So, space. Because all the users are going to suffer from this mistake. So it has to be fixed in the workflow. In fact, learn from mistakes. Never do fix a mistake that has to do with cat's workflow. Always apply the fix in this thing, this mobile, not in the local project files. Oh, yeah, sorry. And it's compacting. So the good news is that it doesn't forget things you type while it's compacting. In the past, by the way, it used to. That's another bug they fixed. So now it's gonna hopefully pick up on these fixes I sent it. Yeah, perfect. The second thing is very important. And in the meantime, I still don't see it having pushed anything. It probably didn't commit its changes yet. It just left them unstaged on this work tree. Okay, well, the good news is it's updating the right file now. It's emphasizing that it's a quality requirement, not just something you can ignore. It's not optional. See, it likes caps, it likes the word critical. It makes this into a header. anything to catch its own attention. Okay, and it logs yet another mistake. Okay. I think we'll be done. I think we're actually going to be able to finish this. And trust you me, it did not take 4 minutes. I think it's been 4 minutes since the last time I paused or something. Okay. Let's find out. Okay, it finished everything. Did you finish the change you were working on? Did you commit your changes? If so, where? I'm willing to bet it did not commit its changes, even though it did finish the change. Why is the camera zooming on my chin? Okay. Okay, committed changes. But did you commit the parser changes at least? Okay, well, it's going to commit something. We're going to see. So this is the styler repository? No, sorry, no. Yeah, wait a minute. Oh, right, they're both styler. Just this is uncommitted, and this is, sorry, unstaged, and this is staged. Okay, so in theory it committed its changes. Let's see what it committed. So this is the main thing we're waiting on, right there. And all these other things are just, you know, all the workflow bugs and mistakes and all these things. Okay, here's one commit, another, and this is the one I was looking for. Well, it made some minor mistakes, even with this commit, but we'll get to it in a second. Let's just look at the changes it made. So this is the main code changes it made. These are all planning related changes, which really we don't care so much about. So we only review this. So it added a new file lambda parser. Right off the bat, I'm not happy with this because if it followed this shared secret business, these two files should be in a different directory. Lambda parser. Should be public. Okay, so I'm just correcting its design there. The actual code itself looks okay. That's one thing we don't like here. Well, true, so we have to make sure that it does not get into another loop. Yeah, I think it's going to be fine. Because here. So why does it need the loop at all? Oh, because it wants to be able to do continue. Okay, this is very reasonable. I like the fact that it has comments. I'm not a fan of the style it used for comments, but we're going to let that go. The spacing is not what I would have done. Use 3 spaces instead of 2. I think that's because of PMD. PMD has this bug. That's actually one of the things I want to fix in my own formatter. Is I want 2 spaces, not 3, and it has a bug. So fine, it's pleasing PMD. While this and that is not equal to this. Okay. Style change. For example, I don't like paren. I like full names. Learn from mistakes. Avoid, not really acronyms. Shortened variable names when the full name wouldn't be too long anyway. Yeah, well, it's too long, who knows? But anyway, for example, wait, actually, update the conventions. So this is going to be specific to my project, right? Not to the workflow. So, so this should be can never spell it correctly. Parenthesis def. So, one of the things you get with this workflow is a conventions file, where it remembers, or rather, you tell it to remember all the styles, the habits you like. So, see, so it's actually learning from the mistake I told it a long time ago, that if I, send it a message that's not related to what it's currently working on, it should just add it to the end of the list. But it acknowledges right away. It says, okay, I got the conventions message you talked about, and I'll address it after my current task. Beautiful. This is exactly what I'm looking for. And sure enough, look, I made the change. And it also updated the conventions file. So I believe if it's smart enough, it should amend this. But if it's not smart enough, it'll just add a new commit. And it's not that it's wrong per se, it's because I told it in the past to amend things of this sort. And it's probably going to get it wrong. Yeah, see, got it wrong. Well, you know what, actually, it'll be a project-specific convention. Yeah, maybe not. Okay, when the user corrections and the relevant commit, since it hasn't been merged to main yet. Is that safe for bigger teams? No, it's not. So I guess I'll just update my personal conventions because I'm a solo developer. Yeah, for me that's okay. For other people, probably no. Okay, so just want to see that I made the change that I wanted. Yeah, I moved them into an internal package. Perfect. That's exactly what it should have done. Let's look at what this looks like. Okay. This looks beautiful. It's exactly what I want. And it's public now. I'm actually not sure that this is correct. Is it? I forget my own pattern. Let's see, get. Okay, shared secret. Nope, I was right, it's wrong. Yeah, it did not follow the instructions correctly. Okay. So what it has to know is that this should never be null. Okay. initialize. So I'm gonna just link it to the example. And it will fix the design. Okay, so in theory it says it amended the commits. Did it amend the commits? 20 something, what's commits? 75. 75. Oh, it amended the wrong commit, but okay. Yeah, perfect. It's doing the right thing here. Is this correct? That might not be correct either. Initialize C. Supposed to pass in C. Yeah, C. And why is that? C is, yeah, no, exactly. You're supposed to pass in a class file, not a string. Okay. So there's just a lot of this back and forth and back and forth. I think you get the point, and I think this video is very long at this point. But it's going to get to a point where it finishes everything. I mean, you can already see it started committing its changes into this branch. This main, ignore it, belongs to a different repository. It's not the same thing. So this is the repository we're on right now. The other one is for the workflow. So for the styler repository, this is our main. It created a new branch for this new feature it's working on, and it's making all these amends. And I'm in the process of updating the workflow so that this becomes a lot neater. It basically offers one or maybe two commits for me to review. It squashes them together. Typically what I do is I squash all the implementation to one commit and all the workflow related changes into another commit. So they're just separate from each other. And that's what I review. And when I'm happy, that's what I tell to merge up to main. So that's the idea. At this point, I'm going to let you guys go. It's getting late here anyway. And I'm sure by now this is a very, very long video. So cool, thanks. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will try to make more videos if you guys have any questions or any follow-up work that might interest you. Take care for now.